Hello, fellow imparters of wisdom. Today, my teaching assistant, William Howard Taft, and I are going to be talking to you about depth of knowledge levels, remote learning, and multiple choice assessments that relate to literacy. DOK stands for depth of knowledge, and DOK was developed by Dr. Norman Webb of the University of Wisconsin, which is actually the home state of William Howard Taft here. That's enough out of you. And what DOK measures is a range of complexity as to how complex a task is for a student to complete, 1 being the most simple, 4 being the most complex. And on the other side, we have multiple choice tests, one of the most popular choice of tests that schools have been using since World War I. Fun fact, when they were first used by the United States Army in World War I, the Army found that they weren't really a reliable measure of a soldier's success, but schools still found them useful as they're the most common means of assessment we see in schools across the United States today. Why? They're usually the easiest to grade, which is understandable because if you have 130 kids to grade, we need the path of easiest and least resistance because a path of grading 130 kids is a very long, frustrating path. Right, Taft? Exactly. So how do we ensure that our multiple choice tests are targeting these more complex DOK levels? Can it even be done? Well, I'm here to tell you it kind of can be done, and if you're able to use them, it actually mitigates a very, very frustrating element of remote learning and multiple choice tests, the Google search bar. So we'll go through each DOK level and sort of give you an idea of what they generally look like in a multiple choice exam, starting with DOK 1. DOK 1 is all about recall and reproduction. It's the most simple of the DOK levels, which is why it's 1. It generally requires only 1 step from the students. As you can see in this question, students are asked to identify or recall the most important crop grown in the American South in 1860, and if you remember your American history, you would know that the answer is B, cotton. How would you have figured this out? You just had to know it from before. If you didn't know it, you got it wrong, or you just guessed right. But either way, it requires 1 simple step. Did we remember it? Great. If you didn't, well, hopefully you're lucky. Now, DOK 2 generally requires what we call a stimulus. And a stimulus in this sense is a passage, image, graph, or data set that a student has to analyze and use some sort of skill to arrive at an answer. And usually this sort of question requires multiple steps. Okay, still only 1 correct answer is going to be apparent. And we see in this question set here a nice DOK2 question, which essentially asks a student to analyze the graph, and that's about it. We see in the answer choices that there's no other previous knowledge that's really required of the student. What they have to do is be able to correctly identify which one of those answer options is supported by the graph above. And we see that our only correct answer option is answer option B. All those other ones are either not supported by the graph above or they're just flat out not correct. Next, we'll look at DOK 3, strategic thinking. Now, DOK 3 multiple choice questions usually for me are the most difficult to create and also the most difficult to answer, which would make sense because they're the hardest ones that you can make into multiple choice questions. But if we know what goes into a DOK 3 multiple choice question, it'll help simplify things for us a bit. So once again, a stimulus is required, and the stimulus should be fairly complex. It should be kind of difficult for your students to really understand on the first go of it. There need to be multiple complex steps that your students need to complete in order to arrive at an answer, and the answer choices themselves should be relatively complex as well. And there's a few ways to do this. 1, you can make the vocabulary choices in your answers different than what the vocabulary is in the stimulus. 2, you can have only 1 correct answer, but many other answers that appear to be correct. And the way to do that is in your question stem, use the 2 evil words of most and least. Which of these does the most of something and which of these is the least of something? So here we see a nice DOK 3 history question. Even though that this is an image, it's still a DOK 3 question because it asks students to do numerous tasks and also requires students to know a great deal of information before they can even answer it. In order to answer this question, students have to be able to figure out the argument expressed in the image, which in this case means they have to look at this complex image, read the captions as well as the captions underneath and understand all of these images within it. They would need to know that Uncle Sam is a symbol that represents America. Thanksgiving dinner is an occasion of welcome invitation celebrating family and friendship. Also, students will have to identify and know that numerous people of various races and nationalities are present at this metaphorical Thanksgiving dinner table, that the table represents America, that the cake in the middle of the table is universal suffrage, that suffrage means voting, that voting is a right as an American citizen, that the 15th Amendment had to do with ensuring voting rights, that the Civil War ended in 1865, and that issues regarding voting rights and citizenship emerged in the wake of the Civil War. Whew! Did you get all that, Taft? No, you didn't, you liar. The question is also difficult because it asks students to evaluate all the answers and determine which one most influenced the argument expressed in the image, which the students are expected to figure out with prior knowledge. C is the most true as it most likely influenced the argument expressed in the image. A is tricky because though the statement is factually correct, historically speaking, the Mexican-American War is further removed from the 15th Amendment, and so it wouldn't have as much of an impact as the conclusion of the Civil War, stirring debates over citizenship. The continued westward movement of settlers increased agricultural production for sure, but that doesn't exactly have a whole lot to do with issues over citizenship, which would have inspired Thomas Nast to have drawn this in 1869. The invention of new sailing technologies made international trade easier, and that's certainly true and probably would have invited certain members to the table. But again, that's probably not what drew Thomas Nast to draw this picture. Now on to DOK4 multiple choice questions. It's a quick discussion because you can't really make DOK4 multiple choice questions. DOK4 asks you to create or to make new things as it pertains to skills and concepts you should have previously learned. If you do figure out how to make DOK4 multiple choice questions, let myself and William Howard Taft know so that we can help you create it, sell it to schools, become super rich and buy yachts, which Taft can't go on because he gets car sick real easy, so I can't imagine what he would do on a boat. Probably throw up. Right? And a few final thoughts on multiple choice assessments and remote learning. One, it's 100% impossible to ensure complete academic honesty. Kids have access to all sorts of resources that we can't see because they're in their space, we're in ours, and we have a camera, and that's about it. And a lot of times that camera is turned off. And two, the only way to really ensure that kids are being more academically honest is to give them rigorous questions that they have to think about and process and can't necessarily just look up online what the answer is. With a DOK3 question, that's a lot easier to make kids do. It also helps if we do things like put time restrictions and try to develop more questions that aren't just multiple choice assessments. Multiple choice questions are a fine way of assessing mastery, but they should not be the only one. You should be using multiple means of assessment, whether it's writing prompts, whether it's speaking projects, whether it's just regular projects, whatever the case may be, multiple choice should not be your only dimension for assessing mastery. But that's all we're going to discuss for today in regards to multiple choice assessments that have to do with literacy, remote learning, and DOK levels. Hopefully you got something out of this, and if you want more info and you want to work further on this, I'm always an email away. Thank you guys again for watching, and best of luck engaging the children in meaningful instruction remotely.